How did the opioid crisis start? That's a very good question and a difficult question to answer because it's multifactorial, the answers to this question. It starts, though, in Canada at least, when the formulation for Oxycontin was changed to something called oxyneo. There's a community of opioid users who were reliant on Oxycontin, but as a way to make it safer and less chance for abuse, the formulation was changed so it couldn't be crushed and snorted or injected by users. So what happens in nature is that when you push and have a selection pressure in one area, then people are going to move to the other. And so this is where fentanyl came into the forefront. So Oxycontin users could no longer use their drug of choice. The next one that was available was fentanyl. It was available as a transdermal patch, and it's very toxic doses that are very dangerous doses, but this is what users are after, is a quick high and a powerful high. And this could be melted down, it could be chewed, smoked, and injected, and it ended up being a lot more powerful than heroin and Oxycontin when it was melted down. So this opened up the door by having a newer drug of choice that ends up being a lot more potent and puts people into withdrawal very quickly because of its increased potency and increased onset of action. So this set the stage. Combine on this, and it's the fentanyl, just to note, it's the fentanyl that's been around, and it was learned that a powder could be produced, but this did not exist prior to in the hospital. It was always injectable fentanyl, an intravenous clear liquid, but in some lab somewhere, probably in China, it was discovered that you can make fentanyl into a powder, and that it's so potent that small amounts can be mailed safely in an envelope and sold. And so now it took traction. So people progressed. It was harder to get these patches, and people migrated over to the fentanyl powders. This made its way into heroin, cocaine, and this is where people unintentionally overdose from inadvertent use of fentanyl. So the other side of this coin, though, is from the physician standpoint. Back in 2000, surveys were taken from patients in the United States, and it was shown that their pain was being undertreated, not taken seriously. So the pendulum had swung in the direction for physicians to be more liberal at prescribing. And there was pressure on physicians as well because there were metrics measured, these are work performance details that are taken seriously, that the patients are rating their physicians, and the doctor did not want to receive poor ratings, and so became more liberal prescribing. This inadvertently led to more opioid addictions, unfortunately. So doctors were no longer being cautious with prescribing opioids. They were using it more often than should have been, and also physicians at the same time did not get the education from the pharmaceutical industry how addictive that these drugs were. Physicians were not given all the facts at that point to know how dangerous that these drugs were. And the physicians also are to blame too, that the quick fix to treat somebody's pain was just to write off a prescription of Vicodin or Percocet and off the patient goes. No problems, right? So the genesis of the fentanyl and opioid crisis is multifactorial. It is complicated. It stems from changing in the Oxycontin formulation. People migrated over to fentanyl patches, then the patches were replaced by powder that came in from other countries and from clandestine labs within North America likely, and unknown quantities were working their way into other drugs of abuse like heroin and cocaine, and even Oxycontin pills. Oxycodone pills can look like oxycodone, but really they're fentanyl. So people were unintentionally overdosing on these, and that's what led to the addiction crisis. The final thing, the opioid crisis, the final thing I want to say though is that the opioid crisis isn't just the unintentional overdoses, it's the sheer numbers of people. For every one person that overdoses and dies, there's 800 more that are actually addicted or abusing an opioid that are managing to survive. So the opioid crisis is not just the person, the typical downtown person living on the street who's injected and overdosed. The fentanyl and opioid crisis affects a lot of people who are highly functional. These are doctors, lawyers, construction workers, other manual laborers who are abusing it in their everyday life and keeping it under control, but slowly but surely their addictions their use can grow and become another statistic. So it's important to realize that the opioid crisis is not just the numbers of people who are dying from overdoses, it's actually the number of people who are growing addicted to the drugs. And the biggest question is why? Why are so many people using it? And there's multiple theories out there that there's childhood trauma, but I personally believe that it's because there's so much stress in life. People use the medications at first to deal with pain, aches and pains, but then they soon and quickly realize, and I know this from personal experience, that they quickly realize that these drugs are also deal very effectively with their own anxieties and stresses. And life is becoming more and more stressful for the middle class. People are having a harder and harder time. There's more and more stresses out there. We're becoming more and more isolated. We have less of the defensive mechanisms that we once had. Like, we're becoming less connected from other people, and this sets the uncomfortable, terrible situation where people are more prone to becoming addicted because of so much stress going on in their life and maladaptive coping mechanisms with stress. So it's a long answer because it's a complicated question, and I'm sure you might have something to say. I'd love to hear it. Please leave questions and comments in the comment box below. Thank you.
If you or a loved one are looking for help with substance abuse, call our 24/7 helpline at 1-800-615-1067. A caring addiction advisor is awaiting your call.